You look like you've been beheaded.
So what we get for like inviting the OCD cameraman onto the podcast. Talking about beheadings on an episode about Syria.
He's wearing a thobe now. Now we can see it, right?
Now you can see it.
Yeah. MashaAllah. The barakah now is filled the room.
Alhamdulillah.
Love to see that. So beautiful thobe. Is it light blue? Allah.
Yeah, I guess it's a bit light blue. Yeah, it's one of my favorite ones actually. It's quite
blue.
It's nice. Baby blue.
I'm wearing a football jersey. So yeah.
What team?
Roma.
Okay.
Yeah, Roma.
Oh yeah, right. See that.
Yeah.
I think Kaleem just wearing like some
t-shirt. I can't tell if it's a thobe or like sleeping wear. Can't. It's one or the other.
I think it's actually meant to be like a thermal underwear, but like I like it. I just wear it all the time.
I recorded last time. I still had a thobe. I was still wearing a thobe for a barakah, and now, I don't know if there's a conspiracy. I don't know what happened.
Yeah, must be.
That's why. And then now Nadeem rocks the thobe, and I rock like a.
And you're walking a t-shirt.
Sure, yeah.
Roma. I was wearing this last time as well, though. Actually, same one. I haven't worn it since. So alhamdulillah.
Well, last time I was in a fancy restaurant, fancy hotel, and this is not a fancy hotel.
But at least the internet's working.
Oh, it's mad.
Seems to be working a lot better. Speaking of which, though, that's so you're up by the north, right? And infrastructure there is a lot better. I guess we should actually introduce what we're talking about. So we're talking about Syria. And Kaleem's experiences in Syria, and you've been out there for a couple of months now, haven't you?
Yeah, about 3 months.
3 months, and it's we tried to record this episode about a week ago, I think it was, in Damascus, where things were quite nice. You were in a nice fancy hotel, but the internet wasn't working, and now you're up in the north of Syria, where they have Turkish internet, which works a lot better. So I guess let's just start with that. I mean, there was a lot of excitement when the revolution kind of completed, I guess you would say. HTS were able to take over the country, do away with the Assad regime. And there was a lot of talk and a lot of excitement about new infrastructure, new civil services. I remember seeing one video at the time about, I can't remember where it was now, I think it was the mayor of Damascus or something, talking about having an app for rubbish collection and this sort of stuff. So I guess let's start there. How's that all panned out in your experience?
I think one of the things that's really important to sort of look at, if you're talking about like development and in Syria, is you have to remember before the revolution, Idlib was the back of nowhere. Like it was really out of the way, completely a backwater, seen as sort of like full of yokels and paindus. The whole sort of situation, you have to really think of it like Bradford, basically. Do you know what I mean? It was just completely nothing here.
Let's explain that term for that reference for the non-UK Bradford. I don't know, what's Bradford in terms of Australian, like what's the most backwater place, Tanzim, in Australia?
I mean, I don't even know what the word backwater means. What does backwater mean? You're saying Bradford, it's getting more confusing.
It might actually be an Australian term. I feel like it's the most Australian sort of thing.
Like, what's the most bush place? What's the most bush place in Australia? Yeah. But when there's no facilities.
Outback, like
Lakemba?
Outback. Like Outback.
Outback.
I I don't know, like Broken Hill. That's I don't know, Alice Springs where Uluru is. I don't know. That's coming to mind. But that's probably not what you're talking. Bradford's still like a city sort of area, right?
Yeah, maybe it's more like Nakemba. Maybe it's more
Oh,
like
okay,
kind of
yeah. It's probably
Nebo
Lakemba.
areas.
Yeah, I mean, if have you been Lakemba?
No, but I've heard the stories.
I just heard. Okay, yeah. Then yeah, I think yeah, Lakemba and stuff little bit run down, but like a Muslim community.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, so
So
it's Bradford, Nakemba.
yeah. So
Go ahead, Kaleem, sorry.
after 13 years of the revolution in Idlib now, everything is actually far more developed than the rest of the country. As I said earlier on, like trying to do this podcast last week, I was in a 5-star hotel that I went to film the podcast, not staying there normally, but and the best internet speed I could get was 500 kilobytes per second. Up here in Idlib, alhamdulillah, I'm getting 7 megabytes per second, which still isn't a lot, but it's a massive improvement over 500 kilobytes. Up here in the north, they've got apps to purchase your electricity, pay all of your bills. You can there's a banking app because Syria's been under sanctions, so they have their own apps for sort of transferring money around and making e-payments. So it's like really, really far ahead of the rest of the country. And some of that comes because of, as you said, Turkish support. But a lot of this stuff has been built and developed here in Syria, in Idlib. And one of the things that the rebels have done is they've really worked with the Muhajirin community as well, and taking advantage of talents where they exist amongst the Muhajir community. And it shows, mashallah, like they've really uh, done a huge amount of development here. And you feel it when you go to the rest of the country. You feel a huge difference. And for somewhere like these backwaters like Bradford to be more advanced than the equivalent of London or Sydney in the Aussie case, it it it's a jeep. It's not the way things are meant to be. But once you take out such crazy levels of corruption, and you start actually just spending 13 years working for the benefit of the people, and not using the country as your personal piggy bank, the effects are huge.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that it all this has come out of Idlib, given the history,
Mm.
and it's really an indictment of Assad, the Assad regime, that these guys in Idlib were able to, while kind of not having a lot of international and financial support, were able to pull all this off, and yet in Damascus, you're kind of still really. I mean, 500 megabytes is kind of Stone Age equivalent of like what we'd expect in terms of broadband or fiber or whatever it is. So it's hopefully, inshallah, it's
I,
an
I, gi-
indication of good things to come.
I'll give you an example. Now, if you try and drive around Damascus, there's bumper to bumper traffic everywhere. Like you literally, it takes you an hour to drive a 25-minute drive. And we're like, how did you guys ever get around? This is crazy. And they said, no. Before the revolution, like you could drive anywhere you wanted in Damascus immediately. It was super easy. And we're like, why? So the cost of cars in Damascus was about 10 times that of the cost of cars in Idlib. So one of the brothers that drove in and had liberated the city, had a Santa Fe, which is sort of like the car of the revolution, to be honest. And they said, like, how much is this car, like, up there? And it said, like, £2,000, $2,000. And they said, no, that car here would be $15,000-20,000. Once you pay all of the bribes and all of the corruption and import duties and all of this to get it there. And they were like, that's crazy. And then the other thing that happened is the price of petrol was so expensive that if you could afford a car, you basically couldn't afford to fuel it, because the price of petrol and diesel was so high in the regime areas that only sort of like the richest 1% could drive. Now, the downside of this is after the revolution, every proletariat guy has got a car and he's driving around and they're driving everywhere. Now no one can go where they want to go. So the roads are completely chocked, full of people driving everywhere. And I mean, that's just one very immediate change to a city like Damascus.
And has that changed quite significantly since the time you've been there? Like, have you noticed in the 3 months you've been? I mean, I know it's a short period of time, but I mean, has that changed significantly?
Yeah,
Or have these things changed significantly, rather?
yeah. People have been ordinary people are able to buy cars and fuel, and not bankrupt themselves, and yeah, people are definitely taking advantage of that.
Mashallah. Right, I feel like we've skipped a step. Let's go back to how this all began for you.
Mhm.
I think I mentioned last time. I remember, I think it was like 12 o'clock at night or 1 o'clock in the morning or something like that when you called me up and said, "Bro," it was like a couple of months after everything happened. You're like,
less
"There's
less
flights
than
now to Syria."
less than
Was
that.
it? It must be, yeah. Must be less than that. Yeah, a few weeks afterwards.
Yeah,
In fact, though, I think we spoke about it. You spoke about your desire to go out there. Pretty much, I think, from even before it fell, right? I think we were watching the events unfold, and you were like, if it happens, inshallah, which it looks like it's going to happen, I'm going to go. I want to go out. And then when the flights opened up, you called me at 12 at night, 1 in the morning, whatever it was. Like, bro, I'm going tomorrow. That's it, I'm going.
I think
Um,
it's
and I'm going
1:30.
something like that. Yeah, it was something ridiculous. It was something ridiculous.
Yeah,
And I was already in bed. I was trying to sleep. Yeah, and you call me up. I'm going tomorrow. And I'm going to be a few months. Whatever it was. I think after
see,
Ramadan you want to come back.
I think you're missing the most important part of this call.
What's that?
The bit where I was like, dude, I need you to pay for my ticket.
Well, I mean, you paid me back the next day. Anyway, so I think it was just you needed that for a couple of hours, whatever it was, and that was it. And then you were off, right? Then you got there eventually, after a couple of days. Um, so let's go with that. Like, so why was the desire so strong for you to want to go out there?
All right, so gonna need to go into a little bit of sort of like my personal backstory here, but I tried to go to Syria not long after I took my Shahada and converted to Islam in 2006. Um, I was on my way to Damascus to study Arabic and work in an orphanage helping kids. Um, I was stopped and held by the British security services for 11 hours without them telling me why. And eventually, that would turn into 2 years in prison and under house arrest without charge or trial, and without any basis for any of this happening to me. Eventually, Alhamdulillah, By the grace of Allah, I was cleared. I was proven innocent, that I'd never done anything wrong. But that whole process for me started with trying to go to Syria. In 2012, when the revolution started, I tried again to go to Syria, this time on an aid convoy. And I was, inshallah, very keen to go and assist with the aid and the work that was going on there with the brothers. And again, I get stopped, this time at the Turkish border. The entire convoy gets allowed through, but they refuse to allow me into Turkey. So I have to make my way home. And this is somewhere that a lot of people that I've been very close with ended up going and working in Syria, doing aid work, helping the people. And it was a place that I've always felt a very deep personal attachment to. Not to mention that, like, one of my best friends, who taught me Surah Fatiha, that taught me how to pray when I took my Shahada, he runs a school here. And so when the revolution happened and the country finally opened up and there was finally this opportunity to come here, it felt like a culmination to sort of my personal journey, to finish that journey that I'd started in 2006, that I'd tried in 2012, and to come to Syria. And it was obscenely sort of like personally important for me to to be on that very, very first flight in. And alhamdulillah, I was on it. I've sort of since dubbed it the party plane. They almost couldn't take off because everyone was singing and dancing and
Hold on, I think you're missing an important detail there. I think I don't know how relevant it is, how important it is, but you kind of snuck yourself onto the airplane because you weren't supposed to be on there, right? It was supposed to be Syrians and journalists only.
I thought we were going to skip that bit.
Are you revealing this gonna get Kaleem into trouble or no?
Always, I'm always up for getting Kaleem into trouble.
So I'm at the airport in Qatar, and I've got all of the paperwork that I need and the visas and everything. But on the day, they've decided that they're only allowing Syrians to be on this very, very first important flight into Syria. And as you might be able to tell, unfortunately, I'm not Syrian, and this was posing a bit of a problem to me. They were refusing to allow me onto the plane. So I'm there. I'm going between sort of like the talking with managers and the people at the flight desk and trying to sort all this out, and telling them that I've been cleared and that I've been to the embassy. The embassy had said that I could go, and this and that and the other. And they were like, nope, it says if you're not Syrian, you can't come. And so I'm really frustrated at this point. And they close eventually the boarding gate. And I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm not going to get on the plane. So I go over to the flight desk. I start reorganizing my flight for the next flight, which would have been in another 3 days. And then thinking to myself, look, I can get everything sorted in that time, and hopefully I'll be on the second flight in. As I'm there at the flight desk, the guy says that I'm gonna move your flight. That's going to be like, I think, about 80 quid. I look over my shoulder and I see a bunch of journalists that are standing with the same manager I've been talking with, and I'm like, wait, don't change my flight right now. And I go over to the journalists, and I sort of stand amongst them, and I start chit chatting with them and making friendly. And turns out that I know a bunch of people that they know from Al Jazeera and from some Channel 4 news agency, and At that point, the guy says, "Okay, we're going to let all the Al Jazeera journalists board a flight to Syria. If you work with Al Jazeera, can you please hand in your passport?" So I just gave him my passport and stood there and smiled with all the other whiteys, and they put it in a big pile and they just let us board the plane and sent us to Syria. So, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala really opened up a way there, because, yeah, otherwise I wouldn't have been on that first flight. Subhanallah.
So you saved 80 quid?
I mean, 3 days in a hotel as well. Do you know what I mean? More than 80 quid.
Ah,
But,
mashallah, that's it.
for me, it was, I told you, it was personally important that I was on that first flight, mashallah.
Yeah,
So,
alhamdulillah.
alhamdulillah.
And so you got on the plane, and then what happened after that? Were you still talking to your journalist mates, and
Yeah, no,
landing?
we were all chatting away, but all the Syrians on the plane start getting up, and they're singing songs about Syria and freedom and revolutionary songs, and they've all got their flags out and they're standing up and dancing, and it got to the point where the captain had to come over the intercom and be like, "Look, if you want to go to Syria, I need everyone to sit down, otherwise I can't take off with you all dancing." And like eventually the stewardesses and stuff managed to get people to sit down just long enough to get the plane in the air, and then everyone got back up and started singing immediately again, and that was the way of it for about 3.5 hours, all the way to Damascus, where, I mean, you can imagine the pilot sort of announcing, "This is the first ever flight landing in a free Syria. Congratulations!" And everybody was giving takbir, mashallah, on the plane. The atmosphere and the feeling on that plane was completely electric. As everyone was coming off of the plane, they were doing sujood al-shukr, and even as we came through, like, alhamdulillah, because I was one of the last people on the plane when the baggage carousel came through. I got my bags first, and so I was the first one to leave the area and come into the arrivals lounge, and there were people there with sort of like coffees and sweets and flowers to give to us, as the first people to be welcomed into Free Syria. Actually, they give you one of these small, tiny, sort of like Arab coffees, which are really, really thick, dark black coffees. And as I'm walking with this coffee, waiting for it to cool down, I see my friends, who I haven't seen for 17 years, some really, really close brothers to me. And I've got this coffee in my hand, and I know I'm going to have to give them like a big hug. So I just sort of like down the coffee and completely scald my tongue, burn it off, and so that I can put the coffee down and give them a big hug, mashallah. And yeah, that was my arrival in Syria, mashallah.
Mashallah, I mean, kind of gives me goosebumps just, how you've described, especially on the plane where I think the camaraderie and the brotherhood and that ummatic feeling of especially when, for example, we see with Palestine and how the Ummah has, tried to unite, and even in the West, with the rallies, and how people are passionate about, trying to do activism, but then, in this situation you're describing, where everyone feels like, united, especially against oppression, right? I think like that's such the beauty of Islam, right? Where I don't know, or I can't really fathom any other sort of faith tradition that facilitates this kind of level of ummatic feeling, or this level of brotherhood and sisterhood that exists. And you can just, how you were describing, like everyone just doing sujood after they get off the plane. I think that kind of encapsulates, like, so it reminds me as well, within the Islamic tradition, where Allah talks about, the struggles of previous ummahs and their tests and tribulations, and how they had to overcome. And we're always not just even just connected in the current time to other Muslims, but to Muslims of the past, their struggles, and we just have to try to continue that legacy of the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So that's kind of that feeling that I get, and I guess on top of what you just described, I'm sure that even to now, like um, how you're in Syria currently, and the experiences you're having, it just keeps. I guess the experiences keep compounding from that time at the plane as well. Would you say that's currently the situation you felt, being in Syria with the wider Syrian people and how they've rejoiced?
So the the feeling of relief, the feeling of the capacity for um, uh, uh, change now, and what's going to come next is palpable here, and you can see every time there's any piece of positive news coming out, there are huge celebrations and demonstrations with people coming out. Even when there was a recent loyalist uprising, there was immediately mass demonstrations across the country in favor of the revolution. Um, uh, Simple things like Ahmed al-Shara becoming the new president of Syria. There was like mass celebrations coming out. I've realized after being here, it doesn't take a lot for the Syrians to get out and start celebrating. Mashallah, like alhamdulillah. There are people
Well, I
that,
guess it's because they can now, can't they? I mean, it's been so long. I mean, almost what, over 5 decades, 54 years, that they've not been able to express the true kind of feelings and joy at things that we would normally express joy at, right? Because of the, I think people forget. Just, I mean, I think we've heard about a lot of. Sorry to cut you off, Kaleem. I think we've heard a lot about kind of the recent past, barrel bombs and the atrocious crimes in Sednaya, and the atrocious crimes of the Assad loyalists and the Shabiha and so on. But I think
mm,
people forget just how long this repression has been going on.
exactly.
Where I mean, when I mean, subhanallah, I mean, to recount some of the things that happened here when Assad fell and ran away. There's the Syrian community here. The few of them are kind of distributing cakes, congratulating everyone. And I mean, in my local immediate community, you never see anyone so happy as them. And I think just to be able to express such a basic, simple emotion, human emotion as joy, um, to have that freedom to really kind of express what you feel, it's something that I think we take for granted, right? So, I mean, yeah, I mean, I think it's really so heartwarming that that's now what's happening. That they are able to come out and express that joy and express, or the opposite, resentment, or whatever else it might be, right? Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, but I think it's important to understand like how this regime was for the Syrian people. Um, we were doing some filming, and we went to a place called Benias, um, and it's really beautiful, picturesque area. It's on the coast, um, mountains everywhere, incredibly pretty. Um, but we went up into the mountains to this, a small Sunni village, which is kind of surrounded by Alawite villages. And just as we talking about to the people there, and asking them about their experiences, they told us that in one day, the Alawites who were in the army came into their village, just walked through the village, stopping at each house, and in every house they would take one or two men from the home, um, and they were just all of them were arrested and taken off to somewhere. The residents didn't know where, and disappeared and never returned. Not a single one of them. In that one day, 125 people were vanished from this town. And so this is the sort of, and this isn't like, that's a fairly extreme example, but these sorts of things were not uncommon. Everyone you talk to has an uncle or a father that had been in Sydney, who had been tortured. Everyone you spoke to has had somebody who had been kidnapped by the regime, just purely for financial gain, and they're sort of forced to sell their family home to pay a ransom to get their family member back. Everyone you talk to has somebody in their family who was a shaheed, because the government were just murdering people left, right, and center. I've spent some time since I've been here with the white helmets. Every single day, they're getting calls that they've found more mass graves. And that's continuing now. 3 months afterwards, they're still finding mass graves on a daily basis, and going and documenting and collecting the samples, collecting the bodies. They say the identification process for all the bodies that they've collected will be more than 10 years alone. And this has been the experience here. And trust me, even though they've been finding mass graves literally on a daily basis, there are many, many more still to find. Assad and his father were brutal. We went to one village, and there was in the graveyard they'd put up a memorial to some of the disappeared people. On that list, just from that town, there was 250 shuhada that were on this memorial. And as we're filming, a Sunni guy walks past, and he stops and he starts speaking to the person that we're filming, and he says that he was forced to carry these bodies. He had a truck, and the army made him pull over, and they forced him to load up all of these bodies into the back of his van and drive them to another town, where they were put into a mass grave. It was done at gunpoint. He was forced to do it. And he said that even the state of the bodies and the way they had treated the bodies, and you can imagine how like traumatizing that is, that he's picking up people that he knew a few hours before, that were his friends, his community, and at gunpoint he's being forced to now be a transport with like his rickety old van, which is not a dignified way to carry those. He said on that day he had to carry 200 bodies himself, load them up, drive them to another town, where he was followed there by military, and then they forced him to unload the bodies into the grave as well. And so this is the what Syria has been going through for 50 years, and now there's this palpable sense of hope that there might be something new and something better.
Subhanallah, the stories you just mentioned, so good, and I'm sure you've heard even more, being there, and from different people and their own first accounts, and unfortunately, that kind of trauma that people have gone through, that it doesn't just go away after a revolution, right? It kind of sticks with families for generation after generation, unfortunately. And I guess that's why the Ummah needs to come together, more than ever in this situation for our brothers and sisters, especially during Ramadan, currently as well. And also, I wanted to ask, you being there and talking to all these people, I'm sure you would have heard other stories about hope and miracles. Like I know that for myself, when I was on social media, there was many stories coming out. Like the one that springs to mind. I can't remember the exact details, but it was something along the lines of there were like a lot of people in a particular jail, and there was a imam in that jail that was teaching Quran to the others there. And for whatever reason, one night he was taken away somewhere else so that other people couldn't learn from him. And then that night, when they were asleep, they all had dreams that the Prophet ﷺ came into their dream to help them teach them Quran. And that's, you have stories like that as well. Many people, I think, I've also heard other stories like, the Prophet will come into the dreams and tell them to, wait and have sabr, all this kind of stuff. And, things will be better. Like, it's unbelievable to hear. And it's truly like, obviously, the proof of Islam as well, right? Like these are truly the most oppressed people being aided, given hope in such dark times. So I wanted to hear from your side if there were any sort of stories of that nature that you've heard of that touched your heart as well whilst you're in Syria.
So I, subhanallah, I was speaking with a brother who spoke really good English, mashallah, and he was held in actually quite a few prisons for an extended period. So for 2 months he was held literally in a hole in the ground. So it was the cell that he was put in was literally dug into the floor, and they would close the door, which was kind of the roof as well. And he was left in there for months on end. He doesn't even know exactly how long he was in there. He said it was too small to sit in because your legs would get thing, but it wasn't big enough to stand in. So he ended up sort of stuck in this sort of half standing, half sitting position for weeks and weeks on end. They would only open the door once or twice a day to throw in some food. And you got to remember, people in these prisons were picked up for absolutely no reason at all. Just sometimes just to steal ransom from the families, and they would be held there. And there's no trial, no process. You don't know when you're going to be released. This brother, he told me that one of the things that would happen to them quite often is that they would have a dream, and the Prophet ﷺ would come to them in their dreams and tell them, today's the day that you're going to be released, prepare yourself. Yeah? And every single time someone had this dream, it happened, and they were released. And my friend said that he had the same dream, and he dreamt on that evening that another brother and himself would be released together. And he was like, Allahu Akbar. He woke up like overjoyed. And sure enough, in the morning, the jailers came and they released the other guy that he dreamed about. And so he took him out, and he was shocked. They left him. They didn't take him. He was like, but no, I saw in my dream that like I would be released with this brother. And then he was like becoming really sort of despondent and shocked. He didn't know what happened. And then in the evening, they came and they released him on the same day as that brother, just not at exactly the same time. And subhanallah, it was clearly, when he said this to me, it was clear. It was like they were at a point where their dreams had become so often exactly true and correct that even if they've misinterpreted a small part of it and it's not exactly the way it is, that was shocking to them, that their dreams, that something from their dreams wouldn't be exactly the way it happened. Because subhanallah, these are the people, some of the most oppressed people in all of the Ummah, in terms of the torture they endured and the sorts of things that have happened to them. And that closeness that they got to Allah, because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is always with the oppressed, meant that when their dreams didn't happen exactly the way they thought it would, that was shocking to them. But subhanallah, look at the mercy that Allah gave to them, mashallah, in the way that He supported them, and now, mashallah, these people are free and building their own country again.
SubhanAllah, man, it's truly kind of heartbreaking to hear everything that these brothers and sisters endured, but then also kind of like quite encouraging, the dreams and the miracles that kind of happened to them. When you say the closeness that they got to Allah, I mean, not to kind of romanticize kind of oppression or being in prison or anything, but subhanallah, that's just kind of lost for words in terms of describe it, man. But really encouraging. But just on that topic, so with these people that were in the prisons and have been kind of released since, what kind of support is there now for them to kind of rehabilitate them and kind of get them through that trauma of what happened to them, if any?
So at the moment, everything that's sort of happening is really on a local level. There's a really big need for people with expertise and with the ability to come in and help in these areas, to come here and give that assistance to the government. You have to remember now that a government that was ruling basically one city, and a bunch of towns in about 2/3 of a small province of the north of the country. They had authority over about 4 million people in total, and now in charge of an entire country of many cities, and 25 million people. And they've come into a huge apparatus that they need to run that do you know what I mean, has been misused by the government for such a long period of time. And so, from a governmental perspective, they're just trying to get a handle on the basics and start putting systems into place for a lot of these things. So at the moment, most of the support for the prisoners and the people that have come out of the prisons is really at the beginnings and a basic level right now. And so it's falling mainly on communities to come together, on NGOs and charities to come and support these people. Actually, one of the things that's interesting, I think, that says a lot about the new government is that a lot of the people that have come out of the prison are actually coming into governmental positions and into ministerial roles, because if you were a leader in the revolution, if you were a thought leader, if you were an academic or an expert in a field, and you supported the revolution, you would definitely get locked up. And so the new leadership of the government is made up of these people, as well.
And I wanted to ask, maybe can you shed even more light regarding the reasons as to why the Assad regime did what they did? You alluded to ransom and all that, but could you shed light, like what was their objectives? Like, having all these, you mentioned, like burial places that have been uncovered, mass graves being uncovered, these prisons that have been uncovered as well. Which is absolutely gruesome, and so it would be great to shed light more on that situation, why it happened, and why did the Assad regime do what they did.
Unfortunately, part of it comes down to a lot of these sort of like Arab dictatorships. They maintain their rule by fear and through fear, and you can see that. I mean, unfortunately, across the the Arab world, that the Muhabarat, the secret police, are an implement of fear, and they disappear people. And this is one way to keep the population in line. If everybody has an uncle or a brother or a father that's been taken into one of these prisons and disappeared, then people are less likely to be brave enough to stand up and speak out about the sort of things that are happening. One of the reasons why it was so bad in Syria and why they took it so much further than everyone else is Assad is an Alawite, and the Alawite community is a minority here. They only make up about 10% of the population as a whole. And so they really needed the apparatus of fear and the apparatus of state for them to maintain their stranglehold on Syria. As soon as that fear was broken and that feeling that their control was unlimited, their army collapsed, and that's when the brothers won the revolution. And so, especially when you're such a minority and you've got Assad didn't even have the complete support of the Alawite community. So when you're relying on such a small power base, you have to completely overextend your oppression and your repression to maintain that fear in the society, so that they allow you to keep on ruling them.
And those, why I asked that question is because there's also some parallels there with not too long ago when Hasina from Bangladesh was taken out of power and had to find her way to India. And because I'm Bangladeshi, so that, obviously is, closer to home for me. And it's like for so long, for many, many years, anyone that sort of opposed the government, they are taken away. There was so many stories, like there was even I think a student from Buet, which is like the best engineering sort of school in Bangladesh. He wrote something anti-Indian, because we see how much I guess the Indian government exploit Bangladesh, and there's people out criticizing that, and then he basically got killed for that, which is unbelievable, right? And there's people that, there's the Chhatra League or the student wing. They do like thuggish behaviors in order to, and then get rid of people that stand up to oppression. And Hasina either takes them out. She hires people and commits murders. Either takes them to. They even uncovered, even just a few weeks ago, like electrocution chair as well. In I think in a jail somewhere underground. So it's actually crazy how willing, like these regimes are willing to do everything they can in order to stop any uprising, in order to keep power within, I guess, the family, and keep. And then they found out as well how much money she's stealing from the economy, especially Bangladesh. It's already a struggling economy. It is a very growing economy in Asia and stuff, but obviously not obviously to the level of what we see in the West, for example. So these people are thieves as well. These people are trying to keep power as much for as long as they can. And I guess the thing is, there is like two ways to go about it. You can either fight back and and there's consequences for that. And obviously the Syrian people have shown immense resilience and fought back, tooth and nail, and mashallah, you can see the fruits of it now. And it's actually a amazing little period, like I guess for the Ummah in the last decade or 5 years. Like it was very bleak. Like we've seen all these sort of regimes and them getting away with it, but finally we've seen some turnaround. And unfortunately, like I've also noticed some in the decades prior, many I'm not going to mention names, but some Muslim organizations, they've never really they've sort of towed the line in a way where it's like we'll accept, we'll find a way to, they sort of normalize the oppression in some way, or maybe blame the people who are oppressed indirectly, maybe not directly, but it goes to show, resistance, fighting back, and that's always been the Quranic narrative anyway. Will bear fruits, and yeah, like the Bangladeshis, subhanAllah, they managed to do it, and now we see, the Syrian people and how they've managed to pull it off. So, it's a global thing that we have to sort of consistently push back and fight back, and not just kind of let it be the status quo. And unfortunately, like, I think at periods that's kind of how it has sort of been accepted by in certain ways, like, oh, it happens, that's life, that's how some regimes are. But we have to try to actively do things in our life in order to fight back, right? Whether it be I guess I was reading some stuff about postmodernism and Foucault and all that. It's like, in spaces of power where, like, we might not be directly involved in the conflict or whatever, but even in our spaces, for example, in the West, we can't speak about certain things in a certain way, whether it be in the workplace, or we can't raise our voice in certain places within society because they'll threaten you or do this and that. We can't just slowly fade away into obscurity and not fight back because all that stuff happens. We need to just continually keep doing the activism. So I think that's our responsibility as a ummah. Like, yes, alhamdulillah, like, obviously Syria happened, Bangladesh happened, but it never ends, right? It keeps going, especially with the ummah being a quarter of the world population, and many people, the Uyghurs and Palestinians obviously as well, and many other Muslims as well, even in Pakistan, the struggle there too. So it just keeps going on, and we just need to keep fighting back. So I don't know where I was going with that question, but
let me pick up on some of your thoughts. So I don't know about you guys, but for me, as somebody who, since I took my Shahada, I've always been involved in thinking about and trying in whatever way I can to be involved in the revival of a Muslim Islamic way of life and Islamic organizations. When the Arab Spring happened, there was a huge amount of hope that potentially a lot of these regimes could fall, and we could see kind of the dawning of a new world in the Muslim world, where these sorts of repressive and dictatorial governments wouldn't be in power in the same way anymore. And I think with what happened in Egypt, with the coup against Morsi, and eventually, may Allah accept him, his death, with the civil war in Libya, and Tunisia basically just going back to pretty much the way it was before, there was a lot of hope was kind of quashed down because of that false start that was the Arab Spring, that really didn't bring massive, meaningful change. And for a while, even sort of like a lot of people I spoke to kind of were like, okay, so what is the future for organizations that are looking for revival, for the raising of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah. And in recent times, we've suddenly had this sort of like second flurry of victories. So Alhamdulillah, Tabarakallah, in Afghanistan, the Americans were forced to leave, and the people who the people of that land are back in charge of their own country again. We see in Bangladesh, as you said, an uprising and a revolution against another family dynasty, like in Syria, that had been sort of like abusing their people for so long. And I think as well, Gaza. For me, it has to come back to Gaza. In Gaza, we've seen the resilience and um, the determination of a people that refuse to be beaten down, no matter how much ordnance and bombs and how much they're arrested and tortured. They've stood up and stood tall and stood strong. And really, when you talk to the people here, especially some of the people on the ground who were mujahideen and involved in the fighting, they said that Gaza was the impetus that sort of like forced them to step up and start a new offensive and really push to take the country again. For the last 4 years, Syria had been in a stalemate where like the lines were kind of set and no one was really pushing one way or the other. Um, and for the people here, they looked to what happened in Gaza. They looked out to what was happening around the world, and they felt inspired that look, we can't just accept the situation that we're in. We need to make a new offensive. And this new offensive, they were only planning really to take Aleppo, but when they stood up and they took matters into their own hands and um, not to downplay the planning and organization that went into it, because I've sort of been looking into that and working on it, and it was incredible the way that this all happened. But the fact that they stood up, the fact that they took that step, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala did the rest, and you saw the army just sort of like crumble before them. And what was meant to be an offensive to take Aleppo ended up being an offensive that took the entire country in just 11 days.
And how
That's sorry, Tanzim, go ahead.
no, I was just going to ask regarding also what you've discussed. I also wanted to mention how, in general, the Syrian people view Jelani and his efforts, and how now he's really taken a. I guess people now associate Syria with him, like worldwide as well, and now he's gone to Saudi, I think, very recently. So he's making. I think he met with Erdogan recently. Can't remember. So there's that kind of relations that's going on. So can you shed more light in terms of, I guess, the how the people of Syria view Jelani, in what light?
So their experience with Jolani is that Jolani, from the get-go, has always been a pragmatist and a problem solver here. So there was unfortunately a period during the Syrian Revolution, sort of 8-9 years ago, where it was kind of got a bit Game of Thrones. There were loads of different groups and organizations, and it was very unclear who would come out of that sort of situation to navigate it, to be in a bit of a Lord of the Rings reference, one group to rule them all. But it turned out that over the course of that process, HTS ended up being sort of like the largely really the sole revolutionary organization that was left, the last power. There were a few other small groups that were still sort of existing, but they were by and large like the only show in town. And now that they've had this victory, even the people that had critiques of Jolani and critiques of the way that the government had been run, they're having to give credit where credit is due to how he's organized and planned this offensive. And really, even though they had this plan to take Aleppo, when they saw that the opportunity was there to go further, they reacted quickly and decisively. They took advantage of that moment and managed to take the entire country. And I think the people here have been impressed with the fact that he's shown decisiveness and aggressiveness to take those opportunities when they're needed, and pragmatism and gentleness at some other times when it's needed. He's not a saint. He's not perfect, and nobody is. But he has been playing the game of politics very well for a long period of time now, and he does seem to be putting the interests of the people forward, and they can feel that he's incredibly popular here. In fact, some of the HTS regime people have to go around taking down posters of him because people keep on trying to put up pictures of Jolani and praising him on these sort of big billboards and stuff. And he brought in a rule and a law that there shouldn't be any idolization of him as an individual, but more as the revolution as a whole. And so I think if you were to have an election today, that there would be a huge show of support for the new for Ahmed Al Shara Jolani and his organization. And that also seems to come from the minorities as well, who have been offered and protection and amnesty and support by the government. So I think that that's the situation as we see, and that's actually very common when you see revolutionary organizations like this that take control of countries. The ANC had almost universal support in South Africa for about 20 years. 20 years is what that revolution brought them, and it's very common that groups that lead revolutions and get rid of repressive governments get a lot of leeway from their population for a very long period of time, because people remember these are the people that fought and sacrificed and lost so much for us to have this freedom that we have now.
SubhanAllah, we can hear the bird song coming from your side there, Kaleem. It's just very heartwarming to hear that. It's just beautiful to hear the birds singing. I just, for some reason, just can't imagine any birds singing in during the time of Assad. So it's pretty amazing to hear it. But
it's kind of amazing. It's quite arid and obviously desert around in these areas. But just outside of my window, there's a really beautiful big lemon tree. Yeah, there's a lot of citrus trees growing in and around this area of Idlib.
Alhamdulillah. I want to pick up a couple of things that you mentioned. So Ahmed al-Shara, Jolani. I mean, I think it's subhanallah. Like there's a lot of obviously intelligence, politically, militarily, etc., and so on, for them to have done what they've done. And obviously, a lot of it's come from Allah as well, obviously. And some of that's evident in kind of recent developments, which maybe we'll pick up on in a little while. No one on the face of the earth would have thought these guys would have made a deal with SDF or the Druze, especially after kind of the agitation that Israel and the IOF have been kind of like conducting in the south of Syria. No one would have thought that, and alhamdulillah, lo and behold, here we are. Just seemingly out of nowhere, they've made this pact. And maybe we'll pick up on that in a second. But I want to go back to what you were saying about taking Aleppo, right? Because you're right. When some of the videos and images started coming out in, what was it, late November, mid-November? I can't remember exactly, sometime around then anyway. Maybe earlier, maybe later, of this kind of action, right, after years and years of stalemate. And these guys were kind of announcing their intention to take Aleppo. And then they did it, right? It was amazing in a matter of days. But I remember last week when we tried to do this episode the first time, you mentioned some really important details about that, about how it was a few hundred guys, 300 guys. In fact, I'll let you tell it, because I think you've got more detail and better detail. Can we go through that? I think that's really important for people to know.
Yeah. So, in terms of the military offensive, so as part of the film that I'm working on, I've been sort of like speaking with various people who were involved in organizing and planning the process of this, and there's a lot of information that I found out about all of that. Some of which I can't really go into now, but when the film's out, you can watch it and find out about that. But some of the bits that sort of are a little bit more well known, every time there was an offensive, there would be Iranian generals flown in to organize the defense for the regime. Through intelligence, very, very clever intelligence gathering, they'd found out where that meeting was going to happen, where they would plan the defense of Aleppo. They had also 2 months before the offensive started, they had snuck a group of their special forces into a safe house inside of Aleppo with weapons, and there were about 30 of them staying in a very small building, and they were just waiting for the offensive to start. So as the offensive starts, and
that's it. Sorry, that's clarify. That's HTS snuck in 30 of the guys into a safe house in Aleppo. You're saying
Aleppo, yeah. And as the offensive starts, these special forces go out and they go to the building where they know that this meeting is going to happen, and they killed 2 Iranian generals and most of the upper command of HTS. And at the same time, you've got to remember Aleppo is a citadel city, so it has walls, has protections. They use the car bomb to blow up the gates, but unlike how car bombs used to be maybe sort of 15, 20 years ago, this one was a remote controlled car. There was nobody inside of it. So they drove this car like a big drone, basically, and blew up the wall and came flooding in. So now they also did attacks on deep behind enemy lines to cut off communication lines. So now the attack happens. There's no senior leadership, and there's no communication from Damascus or from any of the other leaders, and that's basically what causes the first routing in Aleppo. The troops start, regime forces start like fleeing, and at that point, that's where the government sort of like they're in an untested territory now. They weren't expecting their plan to work this well. They thought that this whole area would take a long time to capture, and they react quickly, and they tell the troops to keep pushing and go for the next city, which is Hama. Now, the problem with Hama is it's surrounded by mountains, and they have really huge artillery banks on these walls, and it's always been impossible for the to be taken by the revolutionary forces. And in this immense chase of the people that are fleeing and those that are running in, the brothers get told, wait, we need to sort of like collect our forces again before we go into Hama. But there were this group of about 350 Syrians, a lot of the special forces guys, and they were like, no, we're not going to wait. We're just going to go in. We want to be the ones that take Hama. Yeah, and they just had this zeal, and so they literally just drive straight into the city and start attacking and making their way up. There are many shuhada in that fighting, but they manage just to keep pushing forward, and subhanallah, they take the entire city. It's only afterwards that they realize that there were 30,000 defenders in that city, and the attacking force was 350. And subhanallah, they took that entire city on their own. Subhanallah.
That's Badr numbers, man. Badr was 313 against Quraysh, right?
But bro, it gets even more crazy when you look at the overall size of the fighting forces. So when you look to, and actually, sorry, just quickly, some of the people that were on the regime side, that were conscripts and that ran, I actually had the blessing to interview those guys as well. And we asked them, like, why did you guys run? Like, there wasn't a big force attacking you. And I said, what do you mean there wasn't a big? There were thousands of them. These soldiers all dressed in white that were attacking us, thousands upon thousands. We couldn't take them down, and so that's why they had routed there. And mashallah, the Mujahideen believe, and I'm not going to disagree with them, that there were angels fighting with them, as they came and made that attack. Mashallah, tabarakallah. But if you even look to the overall numbers, so on the HTS side, there were about 25,000 fighters all told. Now that isn't, not even all of those 25,000 were what you would call like your army. That's 25,000 people, your army, but also every mujahid who picked up a gun and joined a unit and was just part of the offensive. 25,000. The regime army was at least 10 times that with its conscripts, 250,000. So somewhere between 200 and 250,000 people in the regime forces. The brothers have said there's one main road that runs from Hama and Homs all the way through to Damascus, and that whole road was just lined with people just walking back to either Homs or to Damascus, depending on like where they were originally from. As everyone had just put down their weapons and surrendered, and they said they were like, you could see thousands upon thousands of people just walking in every direction, just trying to not be part of the war and go back to their homes.
Incredible, man. Incredible. Honestly, it's to hear about this in Ramadan as we approach the anniversary of Badr in a few days' time is just obviously something else. I don't know if you want to come in.
I mean, we've also, like, obviously the story of Badr and Hunain, like, this is like part of our aqidah as Muslims, right? And the faith that we should always have. And it kind of, back to, we're talking about like resistance and stuff. Like, we should continue, fighting in however capacity we can. But we know ultimately Allah, makes the final decision or the final outcome. And in this case, like, it'll happen in ways that we could never fathom, right? And I also heard like, in certain situations, even against the Israeli army, like, people saying like, angels, came and fought as well, like, in certain situations. So this is definitely like, part of our tradition, and we've seen, like, we have the evidence, and like, a story that you've just described, it's just amazing, subhanAllah, that it's just, the iman just grows more and more, right? And we should always just have that continual hope that we're able to do away with these oppressors, right? And I know it's a bit of a switch, but in saying that, a lot of people, like, there was a lot of conversation, like when Jalani and Syria was freed, that because of the Americans and how they were sort of indirectly involved. Many people are accusing Jelani of being like a CIA agent or things of that sort. So, what would you have to say to those kind of queries by people, even from, I guess, I know people. There's even a video like of a sheikh and stuff, who was making that sort of accusation. So, yeah, I'd like to hear your thoughts about that, and I guess if the sentiments of the Syrian people as well in regards to those kind of accusations.
So I've had quite a few people from the UK that are sort of messaging me and asking me about what's going on here, and making that same sort of accusation. So I think it's really important to sort of say that at the beginning of the revolution, when it first started, and it was the Free Syrian Army, not Jolani's organization, the Americans gave non-lethal support to the revolution. And that came in the form of sort of like generators and tents and sort of support, as it were, for the revolution. That period lasted for a very, very short time, and it was for the Free Syrian Army, not for HDS or any of these organizations. For the vast majority of the revolution, the only countries that were giving any sort of support or backing to the revolution were Qatar and Turkey. Turkey primarily, obviously, is on the border of Turkey. So this idea that there was some sort of like American ploy and involvement here, the facts on the ground just don't add up to that. And Mazen was here recently, and he was speaking about this. And one of the points that he brought up is we shouldn't take the victories of our ummah and try and attribute them desperately, just give them away and attribute them to the Americans and other people. Yeah, this was a victory that was hard fought and won over literally 13 years worth of struggle. Yeah, and that struggle has led to a victory here. Now, this idea that this was a Zionist plot or an American plot, the Zionists knew about, evidently because they destroyed them all on the first day of the revolution, knew about all of the heavy weapons and special weapons development facilities in Syria. They had exact knowledge of where they were. They actually had a lot of spies inside of the Syrian regime. They never attacked Syria's missile capabilities. They never attacked their weapons factories. They never attacked any of their anti-aircraft or weapons placements. Why was that? They just allowed them all to exist there for 50 years on their border. Yeah. Because they knew that Assad was never going to turn those weapons on Israel. They knew that there was never going to be any threat to them from somebody that they had completely in their pocket. And there are, I can't remember if it was a politician or a general, but he said the greatest defense that that Israel has is the surrounding regimes that work to act as the first layer of protection for the Zionist state. As soon as the revolution happens, and as soon as there's a new government in there, the first thing that the Israelis do is 300 bombing raids, destroying all of those weapons facilities, all of those bases, all of those sorts of things. Only after the revolution, because now they don't have that security of knowing who's running the country and knowing that a dog like Assad was never going to be a true threat to Israel. Yeah. Now they need to take these extraordinary measures, bombing so many sites across the country, to make sure that Israel is protected. Yeah. So if these people were Israeli stooges and were part of some sort of like crazy plot, then Israel would want their satellite state to be strong, but they don't. Or they're desperately worried and desperately trying to undermine Syria, because now they understand that there's a group of people here who actually really care about the Palestinians and are really going to be invested in freedom for the Palestinian people, and giving Izzah back to the Palestinian people, just as they've taken Izzah back for themselves.
Yeah, it's incredible, man. And I think just to add to that as well, there were some recent tweets. I say recent, about as of time of recording, it's about a week and a half ago, maybe a week ago, from some sections of the Alawite community, begging Israel to come and take over the south of Syria. So I think that just goes to kind of demonstrate, I mean, who really was siding with Israel and siding with the Zionists, and who was really siding with the Syrian people and the Palestinians in Gaza as well. And I think to mention as well that when HTS took over Syria, our brothers and sisters in Gaza were kind of overjoyed at their happiness as well. Again, kind of, it's the two things are so intimately tied, Gaza and Syria. Can't have.
It's worth noting as well. Sorry to interrupt you there, but the revolution in Syria wouldn't have been successful without the support of the resistance that were in Gaza. So it was Palestinians who had been in the resistance in Gaza, who had been part of that resistance against the Zionists, that came here and taught the Syrian resistance how to dig tunnels. And I've been to those tunnels. I can send you guys pictures of them, where on the front lines they were met. They could only hold the front lines and protect the area that they had around Idlib, by using the same tunneling techniques that were used by the resistance in Gaza. And those same people that made those tunnels in Gaza came here, helped the Syrians, taught them how to do that technique, and use those same techniques to hold back the regime for all of that time. So this victory here would never have happened without that direct practical support from the brothers in Gaza.
Yeah, I think this goes to show you, doesn't it, how intimately tied the two things are. And inshallah, we'll see a liberated Gaza and liberated Palestine soon.
Just to
as well.
just to add to what you're saying, there was an interview that Jelani did with I think it was the two British folks. I forgot what the YouTube account was. It was, I think, one of his first kind of public podcasts that he did. And he basically talked about like Palestine and how that shaped him from a young age, like what happened in Palestine. So yeah, like having someone like Jelani, obviously the figurehead of Syria, and then he was just openly mentioning that, kind of should give indication anyway that both causes are intimately tied as well.
I don't know if you guys add in extra footage and information during the course of when you put these things out, but I've just sent you guys some pictures of those front lines, the tunnel networks, and at the points where the tunnel networks come out to the front line for the fighting, there were tanks. I've sent you a picture of one of them that were destroyed, that were literally 5-10 meters away from the entrances to those tunnels. And that's how intense the fighting got in those areas.
SubhanAllah. Right. Should we wrap up with Ramadan? I think we need to mention that. Seems to be a lot happening there.
Before that,
Yeah,
Nadeem, I just
yeah.
wanted to ask Kaleem, do you think, is there anything you wanted to share about Syria in particular that you feel that we didn't cover or we missed out that's really important, that you wanted to just highlight before we wrap up and talk about Ramadan?
Let me give you this as a lead into Ramadan then. There are some numbers here that I find quite, I'm not one for getting into the esoteric stuff of all of this sometimes, but there are some signs here that this is a really blessed revolution. And for me, it starts with the fact that the revolution took 13 years. So from beginning to end, it was a 13-year revolution, which for those of us that know our Islamic history, we know that that was the amount of time that it took for the Prophet ﷺ to from when he started his dawah to going to Medina. So a 13-year revolution. At the end of that 13-year revolution, the victory came in 2024, exactly 100 years after 1924 and the fall of the last Khilafah. And again, there's a hadith from the Prophet ﷺ about the fact that Islam would not be left without a light for more than 100 years. And different scholars have posed that this is a person or the light of Islam coming down to bathe us in its safety and security. Then on the first day of Ramadan, in the first Ramadan under a free Syria, there was an alignment of the planets where all of the planets were from the sun were then out in one line, going out from here. And that's something that only happens once in a generation. And it also, for me, it echoes back to Surat al-Yusuf, where he has a dream of all of the planets making sujood. And so I'm not one normally for these sort of like portents and omens and things, but all of these things sort of lining up about a 13-year revolution, exactly 100 years after the fall of the state, and now this in Ramadan. I feel like the blessings and the barakah in this place are palpable, really, really palpable. And you feel that especially during a blessed holy month like Ramadan.
MashaAllah. That's beautiful. That's definitely a clippable little part, snippet there. And yeah, inshallah, it will go viral. Why Syria is a blessed revolution. But Nadeem, did you have any sort of you said you wanted to mention anything about Ramadan or anything before we wrap up?
No, yeah, let's just I want to hear about what's Ramadan. The first Ramadan is like under a free Syria. I mean, there seems to be, mashallah, a couple of days ago there was blessed jama'ah of scholars in Masjid Umawi. Sheikh Adidu and some other ulama that gathered there and gave advice to Ahmed al-Shara, and they prayed and during Taraweeh and so on and so forth. Just seems like, I want to know about it. I want to know about what's happening in Ramadan and what's it like and how people are.
MashaAllah, it's incredible here. Firstly, when you're in Idlib, Alhamdulillah, Tabarakallah, in the morning at Sahur time, people come around with drums in the street, and they play the drums in the street to help everyone wake up and let them know that it's time for Sahur. And then after the drums come around at Sahur time, there's an early adhan before Fajr starts to remind everyone to pray Qiyam. And Alhamdulillah, there's that first adhan. But so you need to remember that you're still allowed to eat after that one. And then finally, just sitting here and for me, somebody who I've traveled in the Muslim lands and the Muslim world, but to hear all of the adhans echoing out from across the city at Fajr time to mark the time to stop your fasting and come to the masjid and pray, and the feeling of relief is so incredibly strong here, mashallah, tabarakallah. The people here, you can see it on their faces, the joy that they have during this blessed month, and the victories have actually carried on coming. The deal with the Kurds has been signed. The Druze have agreed to be part of the government and have distanced themselves from the fitna that Israel is trying to ferment and create down there in the south. And personally, like, I'm just so excited to see what the first free Eid in a free Syria feels like. I was at the masjid maybe 2 or 3 Fridays ago, and there was an unannounced visit from Ahmed al-Shara at Masjid Ummah, where he came and he prayed there his Jummah behind the Imam. And after the Salah, nobody left. Everybody was just giving takbir to the revolution, takbir to Syria, and people were still even then just like singing these revolutionary songs. And I need the people that out there to know that, especially when you talk to the people on the ground here, they say our revolution isn't finished. Our revolution is not done, and we're not finished until the people of Palestine are as free as we are. And they say the common refrain here amongst the revolutionaries is Masjid al-Umawi first and Masjid al-Aqsa second. Yeah, and that is the sense and the feeling on the ground here, that this is a revolution for the freedom of the people of Syria, but that freedom is not complete, as a very famous South African said. That freedom is not complete until the freedom of Palestine as well.
MashaAllah. Those are beautiful sort of thoughts and reflections regarding Syria and the direction. It's not just, I guess, that's the end. There's a lot more left to be done. And inshallah, we'll work towards that. And yeah, just the beautiful stories you shared about Ramadan and Jelani visiting the mosque. It's just that unity, I like going back to that because we're always reminded about that through our tradition, through our theology, through the stories we learn through the Quran, and even to now. And we just need to continue that, inshallah. But any sort of final thoughts before I wrap up the show?
I think the thing that I'd come back to is just, look, we have a hard enough time really having victories that we can claim as our own as a community. We shouldn't be too quick to dismiss them and give them away, and give away our power as people who are able to be strong, call for revolution, stand up and take back our freedom. We don't always need to gift that away to other people. Yeah, we are a Muslim ummah with agency, with resilience, and with resistance, and we can stand up and we can call and we can fight for our own freedom, and we have just as much right to do that as every other people around the world. And we should take pride in that. We should take pride in our strength and take pride in the fact that, alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us this capacity to have these victories across the world at the moment.
Definitely, and that's a great reminder. Alhamdulillah. May Allah keep uniting the Ummah. May Allah allow us to defeat the oppressors and empower the Ummah continuously. So yeah, I'll probably wrap it up there. Inshallah, it was lovely to have you on the podcast. It's like you're like our sort of correspondent from Syria, the Boys in the Cave correspondent. So thank you for your time. I know last episode was a bit of a fail, but alhamdulillah, I think this one was really good and your insights were amazing, and we'd love to just keep getting more news from your end and what's happening and those sort of insights as well. So thank you so much for your time on the podcast. So for our listeners, thank you for your attention. If you have any questions or queries, feel free to email us at boysinthecave@gmail.com, or you can send us a message through our Instagram page or Facebook, etc. So from our special guest, Kaleem, we wish you all the best. This is Nadeem and I, as the co-host of Boys in the Cave, signing off. Assalamu alaikum.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.